What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Chicago Bears Huddle podcast. I'm Darren Doxey, staff writer for Chicago Bears Huddle.
And I'm Ryan Wooden, a featured columnist for Chicago Bears Huddle.
We're finally back. Training camp is upon us, and Ryan has been there, so he's going to be mostly taking the floor for this thing, and I got a bunch of questions I'd like to ask him. So, what have your overall impressions been at camp so far with the new
First of all,
Trestman era?
we get that one day in there, and it was probably the best day for us to go in terms of a first initial experience and just generally being exposed to the Mark Trestman era because it's the first day of full pads. So we got to see exactly how the tempo would work, exactly how physical he would conduct a practice. And the most important thing to me at that juncture of practice is to really try to get an impression of what it is that Mark Trestman's going to do on the practice field, what his schedule's like, how he conducts practice, the tempo of practice. And obviously a lot of people were telling us Mark Trestman was going to do things quickly. He's going to do things fast. He's going to bump the tempo up. And you could certainly see that as opposed to the structured, kind of methodical ways that Lovie Smith did things in terms of training camp practices and general practice atmosphere. Mark Trestman's he is an up-tempo guy. There's no doubt about it. He doesn't have the whistles and the periods with the time clock running down. Basically, they jump in and out of drills and jump in and out of the huddle very, very quickly. And basically, the one thing everyone's looking to in terms of changing and getting in and out of everything is just him putting his fingers up to his lips and whistling. And so it's interesting to see how he can really kind of conduct the practice by himself. I mean, there's, like I said, he's got the schedule in his hand. He's the only person who really knows what it is they're going to do and where exactly it is they're going to go. And he really is the conductor out there. He makes sure that everybody's getting in and out of everything as quickly as humanly possible. And you can tell at this stage, with everything that they have left to do in terms of learning the system, he just wants to get as many repetitions in as humanly possible. And I was impressed with that for the first day to see how quickly they got in and out of stuff. And I think that as long as they can keep that type of pace and that type of tempo throughout training camp, they'll put themselves in a much better position to have and really kind of learn and know the system heading into the season.
I was excited when they talked about the overall tempo of camp, because think about the Bears' offensive problems the past couple of years, where it's been, is this guy going to be able to, is the play going to get in quick enough before the almost said shot clock, yeah, because it's basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Before the time clock, Jesus, I can't even talk. The play clock is down. How many times has Jay got to the line with 10 seconds left? He can't even make any calls. So that was good. I thought, well, maybe that means Trestman's going to get the plays in or quick and early every time. That would be great.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that they actually talked about extensively today. Obviously, we weren't at practice today, but today I was listening to the score, and they were talking about, they were very adamant in saying, last year there was a structure there where it was Mike Martz calling the plays, and then Mike Tice calling the plays, Mike Tice getting them down into the quarterback's coach sending them into Jay, and there's just a lot of going on in terms of the chain of command, where the play comes from, and then it actually getting into Jay Cutler. This year, much more direct. Mark Trestman will be the man in Jay Cutler's ear, and so basically, the play's coming straight out of Mark Trestman's head, coming out of his mouth, going straight into Jay Cutler's head, coming out of his mouth, and getting out there. And so hopefully, in terms of administrative stuff, like you said, we're going to see a little bit more fluid of a play calling, a little bit more fluid of a huddle, and they can get in and out really quickly. And hopefully give Jay Cutler an opportunity to get up to the line early, assess what's happening with the defense, be able to get in and out of checks and make the proper calls, get the line moved around to where they need to be at. And I think as long as they operate as smoothly as they plan, that's definitely going to be an added benefit to this offense as opposed to the offenses that we've seen over the course of the last several years.
While we're on the topic of Cutler, I have to ask. He said something, I don't remember which day it was, but he said something about not all the guys have bought in yet, or something along those lines. What was up with those comments? Has there been anything else said around on the sidelines? Any of you guys have been talking about that? Because I didn't know if that was some kind of leadership thing maybe he was trying to do, or maybe it was just poor choice of words, or it came out weird. But I was listening to the score, and they were talking about that, and I hadn't heard those comments from Jay. So I was curious. I was curious to know your take on those, because that was kind of like, I wonder what that means. Is he calling certain players out, or is that just kind of, some maybe the veterans not fully adjusting yet from the Lovie Smith Country Club era?
I think it was one of those things where really it just kind of got blown out of proportion, and maybe things were taken out of context. I think what Jay Cutler was really getting at, and it's a very, very true statement if you look down to just the generalities of it, basically what he was saying was people haven't bought into the system yet. They don't know the system yet. They haven't learned the system yet. So people are still kind of learning, and it's going to take an adjustment period of time before people know exactly what it is that they're supposed to be doing in the Mark Trestman offense, getting in and out of things quickly, and being able to say, yeah, I'm comfortable with this. I know what I'm doing now. And I think that's what he really meant when he said bought in. Perhaps, like you said, that's not perhaps the best choice of words. But like I said, I mean, I don't think that he was getting to the point where he's like, people still are skeptical of what it is Mark Trestman's doing. I don't think anybody's skeptical of what Mark Trestman's trying to do offensively. I don't think people are skeptical of him as a coach or his credentials. I just think he means that it's going to take some time before they learn how this system is supposed to run and how they can get in and out of things as quickly as Mark Trestman would like it to happen. I think what Jay's alluding to is that it's just going to take some time for everybody to get used to this.
I agree with that. That's pretty much what I figured. Some people were, oh, it's poor choice of words, blah blah blah. So I pretty much took the same take on it as you did. I thought it was, he could have said it better, and I figured, in Jay, anything he says is going to be under a microscope forever. So that he needs to pick and choose his words a little bit better. But yeah, I didn't really buy into that too much. I mean, while we're on Cutler, I have some things about Cutler. I was reading about his mechanics. I haven't seen any video, maybe a throw or two that Lawrence Holmes posted on Twitter. That was about it. How do his mechanics look? Does he look improved? Because from all reports that I heard, and from people the first day or two, they said his mechanics did look a little smoother.
I think people are definitely worried about his footwork. In terms of what Mark Trestman's going to do offensively, it has so much to do with timing, getting in and out of stuff. I saw the first plays when they went into team, they ran some bunch stuff. And anytime you get out there with 3 and 4 wide receiver sets with motion and the type of stuff that Mark Trestman's going to do, you have a lot of timing issues. And when you have those timing issues, you kind of expect your quarterback to be in a certain spot, be in a certain position, and ready to have the football out of his hands immediately. And that comes back to mechanics and footwork, like you said. And I think they have definitely worked to tighten some stuff up. I think you're still going to see a lot of Jay. Jay's not a guy who's going to be prototypical back there to where he's got the ball high and tight, Peyton Manning style, and he really emphasizes the footwork and the drop back. I mean, there's always going to be a gun-slinging aspect to what Jay Cutler's going to do. So I don't know if Brett Favre. Exactly. I don't know if there's anything you can do mechanically to completely tighten him up and say, okay, Jay Cutler's going to be this robot back there now that looks like Peyton Manning does every time he goes in the drop back. That's not him. What they have done, like I said, is they've tightened up his footwork, they've tightened up his drops in an effort to get him into a position where if it's a route where it's supposed to be 5 steps and out of his hand, the football, he is where he needs to be, the football is ready to leave his hand at the moment that it's supposed to leave his hand. So they've certainly done some things to make sure that the timing aspects have worked a little bit better for him. I think one of the big deals for Mark Trestman, whereas versus what we saw with Mike Tyson, even with Mike Martz, especially last year when they got Brandon Marshall, it was a lot of Jay Cutler dropping back, eyeing down Brandon Marshall, and just waiting for him to get open because that's where the trust was. The trust was in Brandon Marshall going up, getting the football, making plays, and making things happen after the catch. Whereas this year, Mark Trestman certainly he doesn't want him to force the issue. He doesn't want him to try to force the ball to Brandon Marshall and kind of force the ball to him 120 times a year so he can get his numbers. He really wants him to be able to take whoever's open, and the system is designed not necessarily to hammer the ball to Brandon Marshall over and over again. Obviously, Brandon's going to get his numbers. He's good.
He's going to have 100 catches. That's just the bottom line, or near.
He's one of the best wide receivers in football. He's going to get his, but they want Jay Cutler to be able to check down and to be able to go to the open man and not have to force the issue so much. And so a lot of that stuff, like I said, comes down to timing, and they certainly have made that a point of emphasis in terms of getting Jay a little bit more mechanically sound so that some of that timing stuff just works better.
Speaking of the wide receivers, obviously we know what Brandon Marshall is, and I'm slightly worried about the hip in a way because the hip injuries are always risky. I hopefully he'll be fine, but at least now we have other depth on the roster. If Brandon were to go down, I know he rested today. It was just rest. It was nothing, no injury related, or so they say. I saw one video. It was like a 55-yard bomb to Alshon Jeffrey from Jay. How's Alshon looked so far? Does he look better than he looked last year? Because in camp last year, he just looked like a monster right out of the gate. That was impressive last year, let alone how is he this year after working with Marshall in the offseason, from what you've seen in your one day you watched?
Well, the physical talents that we saw last year at camp from Alshon Jeffrey are just one of those things where a big-bodied
It's natural.
receiver who's not a burner, but does have enough speed to create some separation. Big, huge hand, not afraid to go high point the football. So we saw these natural talents, but a lot of people brought up some good points about the way Alshon Jeffrey showed up to camp last year in terms of physical shape. And obviously he had lost all that weight from the way he played at South Carolina as a senior. Everyone thought that he played overweight, and to be honest, he did. He played at close to 240, 245 pounds, and that's just not a natural weight for a wide receiver, a guy that you expect to make plays on the outside and be devastating after the catch. And so in an effort to really kind of increase his draft stock, heading up to the NFL scouting combine, he cut a lot of weight, but he didn't do it necessarily in the fashion where he cut the weight, kept the body, kept the muscle on him. He really just kind of cut a lot of that bad body weight quickly, and really it was more of like a wrestler's cut than it was like a football's cut. Mm-hmm. And he kind of, even though he lost all that weight, he was still a little bit soft-bodied. This offseason, being able to work with Brandon Marshall and being able to get into his own workout regimen and kind of hang around closer to what his actual playing weight was, he was able to stay around the same weight but add some muscle, add some bulk, and he kind of looks a little bit stronger on the ball this year, which is something that a lot of people think are going to help him. Obviously, health is a concern with him last year. I think that really kind of boils down to the bad body.
I'll agree with that. Yeah, he did look very not how he showed. Like, if you compared him and Brandon Marshall last year,
the fact that he's able to come out this year, yeah, absolutely. And if Alshon Jeffrey is able to really kind of maintain the way he's come into this camp this year, stay healthy, he definitely looks like a guy who is going to be a legitimate number 2 option, someone who can take away a little bit of that stuff from Brandon Marshall, or if defenses are going to focus all their efforts on Brandon Marshall, certainly make them pay on the other side. So to be able to have a legit big-time wide receiver out on the other side across from Brandon Marshall is certainly going to open things up for this offense. In terms of other places at wide receiver, Earl Bennett looks relatively healthy at this point. You never really count on him to stay that way for too long, but
he's just a trash dummy.
If he can and he gives you the guy that he was as a second-year and third-year player as the number 3 wide receiver, and he can give you 40 to 50 catches, I think that's something you certainly like a lot. The one name that I've actually focused a lot on so far this year, because I already did a feature on him for Chicago Bears Huddle, Joe Anderson is the guy He is a guy who put in a ton of work last year at camp. He was an undrafted free agent, not a guy that anyone really counted on doing anything. But really what he did was he just outworked a lot of people. And I think when you see undrafted free agents who stick, those are the guys that you normally find out who's like, yeah, okay, the guys who are willing to outwork the guy next to him and the guys who just really put the extra effort in. Him and Matt Blanchard, Britton Golden, a couple of those other unheralded guys last year would go out after practice every single day and get extra reps in, just throwing to each other. And that's something I think helped him a lot. Really kind of turned some heads in the front office, and it was enough for him. This isn't a guy who's big, strong, and fast, but this also isn't a guy who's tiny, weak, and slow either. He's just, like I said in the column or in the feature, he's your average Joe. And so what he did in terms of work ethic certainly was enough to turn some heads in the front office. He was able to earn himself a spot on the practice squad, worked hard enough on the practice squad, and took that seriously enough through the course of the first 14 weeks of the year to earn himself a spot on the active roster after Robbie Gould got sent to injured reserve. And then when he got called up to active roster, he was just a special teams. He created mayhem on special teams. He came out, he had a few big hits. I don't remember if you remember the Green Bay game towards the end of the year where he slammed Randall Cobb.
I remember that.
Made him look absolutely silly. He did enough in those 3 games to certainly turn some heads. And now this year, it's really for him, it's about not only is he going to continue to be a special teams force, but they're hoping that he can show a little bit of reliability as a wide receiver. And I think right now, honestly, people are looking at him as the number 4 wide receiver on this team.
He's got the chance. Because he's battling with Aroma Shadu.
Yeah, and right now he's got the leg up mostly because he gives you that special teams edge. And with Devin Hester looking like a guy who is going to still make this team, but exclusively be a return man, the Bears are probably set to carry 5 wide receivers. And Joe Anderson is looking to nail down one of those spots, and I would be surprised if he didn't at this point, to be honest with you.
And all the reports from today, since Brandon Marshall was out, he got a ton of reps today, and supposedly he shined at least early on in the practice, from what I had saw on Twitter, and then I tuned out of the Twitter universe. But I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I remember seeing him after him and Blanchard stayed after almost every practice, and Joe and Anderson was there too. So that's great. If he can, I mean, really, Aroma Shadu, You know what you're getting out of him. I'd rather have a guy like Joe Anderson if he's going to outwork the guy next to him. He was obviously worked hard already, so I would doubt that doesn't continue to happen. And you mentioned Hester. Is he bored? Does he look bored out there? Because I was reading about, I saw someone post on Twitter that he was basically just fielding punts and that was it. Just catching punts all practice. Is he look extremely bored yet or no?
Honestly, the amount of time that I was actually in eye range of Devin Hester was so infinitesimal on Sunday. It was unbelievable. I mean, he was probably in my sight line for a grand total of 2 or 3 minutes of the entire 3 hours of practice that we stood out there. He pretty much sits out on the other field, works the jugs machine, fields punts by himself over there. I saw at the end of practice when they were working on some other stuff before they finished up with special teams and finished up with team, he was over there doing ladder drill and stuff like that, just kind of keeping his footwork sharp. Really, yeah, he wears a white jersey, which is kind of that's meant to indicate a defensive player, but he doesn't obviously do anything with the defense. So he kind of really just works as a specialist. So you get the kickers, the long snappers, the punters, and Devin Hester over there on their own field doing their own thing. You don't really get to see a lot of him. I don't think they were kidding when they said that they were going to look at him exclusively as a return man. I didn't see him get any looks or any reps at wide receiver. I mean, you think maybe if they absolutely need something, it's fourth and God knows how long, or they're 60 yards away from the end zone, and they just want someone who can run fast and they can throw the ball as far as seemingly possible. Maybe he catches a rep or two like that, but other than that, I don't think you're going to see him as a part of this offense no matter how bad or how poorly it goes for him. So don't expect to see Devin Hester as a factor at wide receiver whatsoever. Going back to what you said about Devin Aromashodu, Joe Anderson, it's not necessarily those two battling for a roster spot. Basically what you have is obviously Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, Earl Bennett. Those three are locked up wide receivers that you're going to keep there. With Devin Hester likely to still make this football team. And granted, there is still here, if they don't think Devin Hester has the explosiveness as a punt returner, they can go out and save themselves a couple $1 million in the salary cap by cutting him. So I don't think Devin Hester's spot on this football team is necessarily guaranteed. I think they're definitely leaning in the direction of keeping him. But they're going to want to see some stuff from him in the preseasons in terms of explosiveness in the return game.
And I think he'll make it just on the fact that there's more reward than risk now at this stage in the game. It's not that much money, and if he comes back and he's focused on special teams like he used to be now that he's not playing wide receiver, even if he gives you 2 returns, that's worth it overall.
Yeah, but the thing winds up being if they do keep Devin Hester, they're probably not going to keep 6 wide receivers. They're probably going to keep 5. So like I said, you have the 3 that are locked in, and then for those last 2 spots, you're looking at guys like Britton Golden, Joe Anderson, Devin Aromashodu, and Eric Weems, who is still on this football team.
Forgot about Eric Weems.
And still makes a little bit of money and makes enough of an impact on special teams to where I think they'd be reluctant to get rid of him. So I think you look at Weems as a guy who's probably going to make this football team. And then you're looking at a spot there where it comes down to Aromashodu, Joe Anderson, Britton Golden, and then rookie wide receiver Marquise Wilson, who has actually turned some heads athletically with what he's been able to do. So wide receiver is one of those really, really interesting positions to see how that turns out. I think they have 7 or 8 guys that they like, only 3 or 4 that they're truly comfortable with, and they're going to carry 5. So you're going to have a lot of fluctuation there, and it's interesting. That's why it was so important with Brandon Marshall taking that health day today to see Joe Anderson being the guy that got those first-team reps. Certainly that leads you to believe that he's the leader in the clubhouse right now, but there's so much time left in camp, and I don't think there's anything set in stone. These guys are going to absolutely battle it out over the course of the next several weeks, and it'll be interesting to see who the 5 wide receivers they wind up carrying are.
I forgot about Weems. I mean, and Weems can contribute on offense, too, in limited doses. I mean, he's got the speed. He's got to get him the ball on a screen, and he can get through the defense. But I mean, he's a more than capable returner too. So, like, I mean, you talk about Devin Hester possibly getting cut. I mean, if you cut Devin Hester, Weems is your return guy. That you could do a lot worse than that. So, I mean, the Bears are pretty much, I don't want to say they're safe at a lot of positions, but they're pretty comfortable with all the roster moves that they have made and can make. Especially with one like Hester, you get rid of Devin, you get a guy like Weems who plays both ways on special teams. So, it works out good for the Bears, obviously. But sticking to the offense, I can't not go to here, even though it's only been a couple days of camp. I heard Webb's getting smoked. Is this the truth? Did he get blown by as much as they made it seem like on the internet?
The very first team session
Oh
on
God.
Sunday, and they got quickly into team. That was one of those things where we're talking about the pace and the tempo
Yep.
of practice. They went out, they stretched. First of all, the intensity of stretching is something that I got to comment on real quick. With all the injuries that we've seen in the NFL over the course of the last couple of days, in terms of the Macklins out there, the Dennis Pittas, I think we saw Copen out in Denver, the center for them got torn ACL today. There's been
Yep.
all these injuries that we've seen over the course of the few days. You can tell that was enough to make the strength and conditioning staff a little bit nervous, and they were getting on guys about stretching. I mean, they were so intense during just the walkthrough part of the beginning of the morning where they're kind of walking through lines, doing burpees and leg kickers and grapevine and all that stuff they do to get their legs loose. They were getting on those guys and making sure that they were taking the stretching seriously. So you can tell there's a little bit of fear in the league right now in terms of all these freak injuries and accidents that we've
Well,
seen
and Turk
happen.
McBride's out for the year, and Bushrod's hurt now.
Yeah, Bushrod's a day-to-day thing. I
Yeah.
don't think that's
Still,
anything that's really going
it
to
worries
linger or
me a
be a
little
problem.
bit, but not much.
McBride done for the year. So, like I said, that was something that stood out. But going back to Webb, they got very quickly into team, and the very two first plays of team, Jamarcus Webb got absolutely destroyed by Corey Wooten. And granted,
It's Corey Wooten, but still.
Corey Wooten looks just as good, if not better, than he did last year. I mean, he looks in fantastic shape. He's just got an explosive
confidence
first
now.
step. He's got an explosive first step off the ball. He's coming into a contract year. He had a 7-sack year the first year was healthy this year. You can tell he smells blood in the water and realizes that he can probably earn himself a ton of money if he stays healthy and productive this year. And he made Jamarcus Webb look absolutely silly on the first two plays. He was 3 steps out of his stance by the time Jamarcus Webb rose up.
Realized the play
and
started?
both of those first 2 plays, it was unbelievable how quickly he was in the backfield. And by my count, I think on the day, Corey Wooten almost going exclusively against Jamarcus Webb on that right side, he probably would have had 4 or 5 sacks. I mean, he was disruptive. He was in the backfield all day. Obviously, he couldn't actually make contact with the quarterback, so that number is up for interpretation, whether or not Jay or any other quarterback that was back there could have potentially gotten away from that. But, yeah, he was giving Jamarcus Webb a rough time. And now, granted, me and Adam had a lengthy conversation about this while we were there. What Jamarcus Webb has done in terms of growth as a professional is certainly something that you appreciate. Obviously, he's had a lot of issues that are well documented in Chicago. People have given him a hard time.
I think a lot is an understatement.
I think the right side, though, is still a more natural fit for him.
Agreed.
I think with the youth that he has and the natural attributes that he has in terms of size, in terms of strength, I think the right side is going to eventually be a spot where he can be a comfortable NFL starter. I'm not talking about a guy who's maybe ever a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro. But I think this is a guy who will eventually grow into that right side and be a guy that you're comfortable with at right tackle. But he certainly did not look very comfortable against Corey Wooten on Sunday.
See, when they moved him back to right tackle, I said, okay, he was better as a right tackle than he was as a left tackle. He's always shown some kind of improvement every single year in the NFL. But, I mean, how long can you stick with a guy who can't get off the line? I know. It's like you got Kyle Long. Hopefully, can just step up and be the guy. But I don't believe that Jamarcus Webb will ever be more than that's. All right. You could do a little bit worse at the right tackle position. Like that's how I view him. Like, is he the absolute worst at right tackle? No, but you could find a lot better. Obviously, you can't because they're not just out on the street. But hopefully, Kyle Long comes along and really contributes to that position. But I mean, the first thing. I mean, granted, it is Corey Wooten. Corey Wooten, like you said, last year. First year healthy. I remember. I don't think it was you I was talking to at camp last. I think it was Adam, and we were just watching Corey Wooten. And it was just. I've been a big Corey Wooten fan forever. So the fact that he was finally healthy last year, I had a feeling. I was like, this guy's gonna come out. He's gonna contribute this year. I didn't think he'd be as consistently good as he was, but this year, I mean, like you said, contract year, he could be one of the top defensive ends in free agency next year if he comes out and has a 10 or more sack season. So. Granted, he's getting smoked by a guy who's playing with a chip on his shoulder probably and definitely has the confidence now, let alone his ability, because he's shown every bit that he can be a legit starter in the NFL. But Webb, I mean, I guess that's good competition, but he also went against Julius Peppers for the last 2 seasons. So maybe, I don't know. I would hope Webb would be better now than he was in 2010 at right tackle, which he probably is, but that's not a good way to start your camp.
We all seem to buy in, and just sticking with the offensive line theme, we all seem to buy into this notion that they're pretty set on their starting five up front.
Yep.
And the impression that I've gotten over the day that we were at practice on Sunday, and then even through the course of today, is they're not anywhere near as close to set on a starting five as we think so. Obviously, I think that left side is pretty well structured. You're going to have Jermon Bushrod at left tackle. You're going to have Matt Slauson at left guard. Roberto Garza is going to be there at center. But what they're doing at the other guard spot and then even at right tackle, I think, is certainly still up for interpretation. I think they like John Scott's versatility. They think that if Jamarcus Webb, for whatever reason, really struggles on the right side this year, that John Scott can be a guy who can step in a pinch there.
They seem like they like that guy.
They like Jordan Mills, the fifth-round pick out of Louisiana Tech. Kyle Long gives you some versatility in terms of they're playing him on the inside a lot right now, right guard, but they do hope that he eventually turns into a right tackle. James Brown is a guy that is actually still running with the ones quite a bit. And actually, I mean, as of right now, he would probably be your starter at right guard over Long. Granted, that has a lot to do with the fact that Kyle Long wasn't able to go to minicamp because of rules about graduation. He still had to finish up some stuff at Oregon and was not allowed to participate in minicamps because Oregon has a late graduating date. It was nothing that Kyle Long did wrong, nothing that the Bears did wrong. It's just some certain rules that were in play there, some antiquated rules that did not allow Kyle Long to be a part of minicamp, so he's a little bit behind in terms of install. So as of right now, he's still getting reps with the ones, but he's not necessarily your first-team right guard. I think James Brown would technically get that role. But over the course of camp, you expect that Kyle Long will eventually establish himself. He's proven that he has a mean, nasty streak. He's proven that he is every bit as strong and as athletic as Phil Emery hyped him up to be when they took him as the first-round pick. And I expect him to be that starter at right guard, but right now he is not technically plugged in at that position.
How has he looked so far, from what you've seen? I mean, obviously he's a little bit behind, but so he is everything he's been hyped up to be from what you can tell athletically?
You can tell just based on where he's at in terms of footwork, knowing what the system is. There's, like I said, those little things because of not being at minicamp, he is behind. But he had a couple of issues there, or a couple of series there where he was running against the twos. And granted, like I said, they're running against the twos, so it's not like he's up against the first-team defense. But he was absolutely destroying people, just manhandling them, tossing them around, pancaking people.
And the twos aren't super slouches on this team either, as far as defensive line goes. I mean, they're not bums on the second unit.
Yeah, and I mean, he looked good. He did. He looks strong. He looks athletic. He looks very much like a guy who will be a long-term starter in the National Football League in the offensive line. Granted, it's early. Like I said, he's going to have a lot to do in terms of catching up on the playbook and stuff. And I think eventually he does wind up being your starter at right guard. But he's got a ways to go. But in terms of just raw talent and ability, you definitely saw flashes of that on Sunday, and that was enough to get me excited about where he's going. Obviously, like it's early. He's got a lot of stuff to learn. You're going to have to see that on a lot more consistent basis. But yeah, he showed some flashes for sure.
Speaking of I don't mean to switch sides of the ball, but I heard Paella is completely, or Stephen Paella, however you say his name. I still haven't figured this out in his third year. How's he looked? I hear they couldn't really stop him yesterday or the day before. I don't know if it was the day you were there or not.
He's been solid. I mean, he didn't to me look like explosive in terms of a guy who is absolutely disruptive and in the backfield constantly. But that's not actually what you're necessarily looking for from a nose tackle in the first place. When you got him plugged in at that one technique, you really just kind of need him to be able to occupy a center and a guard. Give your three technique when you got an explosive guy like Henry Melton lined up next to you. Give him the opportunity to work one-on-one against a guard and give those disruptive forces on the edge, and Corey Wooten and Julius Peppers the opportunity to work one-on-one against tackles. So you really need Paella to be a space eater, and he did that admirably. He holds his ground. He's not a guy who's going to get blown off the line of scrimmage. He's able to hold a gap. Yeah, I mean, he kind of, obviously it's a little bit different than what you asked for from a 3-4 nose tackle, but some of the concepts are relatively the same. You have to have these guys who are able to hold space, occupy a gap, occasionally take on a couple of linemen at a time, and just give yourself an opportunity to create matchups at all the other spots in the defensive line where your more explosive playmakers are at. And he does that admirably. The problem winds up being what is behind Henry Melton and Stephen Paella. I mean, they like Nate Collins. He's a guy who can flip back and forth between being that one technique guy, being the backup to Stephen Paya, and being the backup at 3 technique to Henry Melton. But with the retirement and that just last second get out of town by Cedric Ellis, they're kind of hurting at depth at tackle. I mean, to the point where at the end of practice on Sunday when they're going through walkthroughs and then even going through some of the team stuff they did, Corey Wooten was actually getting some run at tackle, kind of in the way that Israel Adonijah did last year when they would go and try to do their four-man balls to the wall rush. They'd put Henry Melton in there. They'd slide Wooten to the inside, have Peppers on the outside, and then bump Shea McClellan out there to that other speed rush and defensive end. And so I think if you would imagine them making any other moves in terms of going out and trying to add depth, I think defensive tackle is the place they're going to go, especially with Turk McBride going down. McBride wasn't going to do anything inside for you at tackle, but with him going down, you look at Jamal Anderson, the guy they signed after Cedric Ellis decided that he didn't want to be a part of professional football anymore. Anderson was a guy they looked at maybe as a guy who could swing outside and inside and give you some versatility. But with McBride going down, Anderson and Kyle Moore have to focus a little bit more exclusively on working at defensive end. So they still need some help at defensive tackle there. And if there's one area in terms of depth defensively that I worry, it's probably right there at defensive tackle. I feel really strongly with what they have at Henry Melton and Stephen Paya, but they could definitely use some help beyond what they have there.
I was going to mention the Wooten and Peppers coming inside, because every time Peppers has ever been inside, I mean, it's not even fair for the guards on the opposing line. However, if this brings me to a couple different things. McClellan, they said he lost weight coming into camp, which kind of made me raise an eyebrow because I thought he would, if anything, he would put a little bit of weight on for getting stronger. Does he look stronger? Does he look? Because last year it seemed like he would just get pushed around very easily, but he always, I mean, off the line, he was constantly getting past this guy. He just never really fit. He never quite got to the quarterback last year to get the sack out of it. So does he look stronger? Does he look like a better player this year? Because last year he could have definitely been stronger in camp.
Adam and I were talking about this rather extensively on Sunday at camp, and I don't think he lost any weight. If anything, I think he gained weight in terms of the way he looks physically. The weight that he did put on, or the muscle at least that he did put on, even if he did lose weight, is mostly in his lower body, in a place where he can certainly constitute to gain some weight. He was a little bit chicken-legged last year.
Yeah, definitely.
But he still looks every bit as explosive. Granted, I don't know that he'll ever be at a size where you look at him and go, yeah, that's a guy who can hold his own at defensive end. He can consistently.
He's always going to look like a linebacker, a small linebacker.
Yeah, he definitely looks undersized for a defensive end, but he's still explosive off the edge. If he can add a little bit to his pass rush repertoire, I still hold out hope that he can be a guy in a situational pass rush situation who gets 20 to 25 snaps a game in pass rush situations and goes out there and kind of wreaks havoc. Like I said, adding to his repertoire is going to be the biggest part of what he does in camp this year. He cannot you cannot get by in the NFL just by trying to run by people on the edge. You've got to be able to throw a little bit of versatility. You got to have an up and under move. You got to have a bull rush. You got to have a swim move. You got to be able to have a spin move. I mean, if you don't have multiple things that you can go to in terms of ways to get by whoever you're lined up against, you're kind of putting yourself in an immediate disadvantage. And until he builds that repertoire up, I don't think you're looking at any more than a 3 or 4 sack a year guy who just hopes that he comes in on 3rd and 15 and can just run by the tackle on the outside. So he's got some work to do there, but I think physically he looks stronger. I think he looks a little bigger personally to me. I don't know if that's necessarily true in terms of what he weighs, but he looks better and he looks every bit of explosive. Right now it's just down to getting some of that technique stuff locked in. And I think they're still pretty hopeful that he can be a contributor and be a guy that they're comfortable with at defensive end, specifically in those pass rush situations.
He's essentially just got to be what Mark Anderson was. Because with Wooten and Peppers as good as they are, I mean, if you're going to move a defensive end into tackle, if McClellan can come in and fill in for Wooten or Peppers when they come inside, that you have a lot of speed on that line. And I mean, we definitely know McClellan's explosive, but if he could just get if he definitely did get stronger, I mean, he should be a better player. He just has to have that Mark Anderson effect, not quite 12.5 sacks, but you give the Bears 7 sacks, 8 sacks like Corey Wooten did last year, while Corey Wooten and Peppers put up around the same, if not hopefully double-digit sacks, one of them. The Bears' line should be good, but the depth definitely concerns me now. I just was talking about how a week or two ago, Adonijay, losing him, it sucks, but it won't suck as bad because we got, Cedric Ellis, blah, blah, blah. And now with him retiring and McBride out, all of a sudden we look thin at a position that really had a lot of depth, 2 weeks ago. So that's definitely a concern coming in. But if McClellan and Wooten could take that next step and continue to progress, they should still be okay. I mean, I agree with you on them finding another defensive tackle to bring in. They have to. They're forced to now. At corner, you're kind of all right at. Receiver, you got a million receivers you can throw on the roster. So I agree with you. I don't think they're going to go out and sign anything but a defensive tackle.
Yeah, they went from having 5 or 6 guys at defensive end they were really comfortable with, and 4 guys they were really comfortable with the defensive tackle. And if you have 10 guys across your defensive line that you're super comfortable with, you're in really good shape there. Losing McBride for the year and then losing Cedric Ellis to retirement really kind of put him in a pickle, because once you get down to the point where you have 5 ends and 3 tackles that you're comfortable with, you got to add a tackle in there, or you have to have an end who has the versatility slide down to tackle. But if you're sliding one of those ends from tackle, now you only got 4 defensive ends you're comfortable with. You still need some depth there. So the defensive line in general, I think if they would feel the most comfortable with, they can go out and find one of those guys who's just really comfortable at the 3 technique or popping out to end occasionally when you need him. A guy who's predominantly a defensive tackle but can move out there to defensive end. That'd be a guy that they'd super interested in. I don't know if that guy exists.
Yeah, because you're basically just talking about Henry Milton a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I don't know if that guy necessarily exists or that he's out there for them to get, but you can bet your bottom dollar that Phil Emery is definitely combing the help wanted pages right now looking for that guy, because they need a little bit of help on the defensive line.
Because the guy you just described is 2011 Henry Melton, so I'm not too sure there's another one of those floating around out there in free agency. Yeah, it's another person, you could switch it up and you could put him on the outside too. I mean, they definitely have the versatility there, but now losing Adonijay sucks because he would have been perfect. I'll throw him inside. If he's a full-time inside guy, okay. I'm not complaining about that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they were really comfortable a while ago, and now they're nowhere near as comfortable right now. And you get the sense they're scrambling a little bit. Mm-hmm. The one X factor that could kind of step up and maybe make this a little bit less of a burden for them is if Cornelius Washington, I mean, this is a guy we talked about a lot during our draft show. This is an explosive guy off the edge, a guy who looks the part. He is solid. He's 6'3", 6'4", 270 pounds. He looks like a guy who can make a difference off the edge. If he can be that guy who steps up and really makes them comfortable at defensive end to the point where they can slide Jamal Anderson to the inside a little bit more exclusively and let him get more comfortable working in a 3 technique, that could give them an opportunity to be a little bit more comfortable on the outside. Granted, it's so early in camp now. They've had pads on for 2 days. They've been in camp for 4 days total. They just haven't seen enough from Cornelius Washington to be that comfortable. But over the course of the next week, that's going to be one of those guys that people watch very intently to see if he kind of grows into this role and can be a 5th or 6th defensive end for them that they can be comfortable with.
How's he looked so far in the little bit of time you probably got to see him? As far as athletically, has he looked like he's got it together? Because it's one of those guys, he might not be all there all the time.
Yeah, I mean, he looks the part. There's no doubt about that. And it's sad to say that, because the last time I said this about somebody who, oh, yeah, they looked the part, they looked like they can make a difference, it was Brandon Harden. Ooh. And 2 weeks into preseason training camp, he was out for the year. And this another issue.
He definitely did look the part, though. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, it's another issue. You look at Cornelius Washington, a guy who's had issues with injury. He's had his legal issues. He's had his off-the-field issues. And, I mean, there's so many other factors besides what you see on the football field. In terms of what I saw on the football field on Sunday, honestly, I didn't see much, because at the time, Turk McBride was still healthy. Jamal Anderson was there. They have Kyle Moore, who's a guy that we haven't necessarily talked about. I don't know if that's a guy who makes a huge difference, but he's a good stopgap type of guy at defensive end. So they were still fairly comfortable at defensive end to the point where I didn't really see Cornelius Washington get a particularly high number of reps, at least not enough for me to really make any sort of impression about him. Now, though, with everything that's transpired over the course of the last 2 or 3 days with Cedric Ellis, the signing of Jamal Anderson, where they're going to play him at, and Turk McBride getting hurt, you're going to see a lot more of Cornelius Washington. And this whole someone's got to step up and fill the void type of mentality that everyone takes on a football team, you're going to have to see that from Cornelius Washington over the course of the next couple of weeks, because, like you said, the defensive line depth is going to wind up being so critical for him.
And defense is hard to judge in camp, and I think that's one thing people don't really fully understand either, who don't get a chance to go even just to sit at camp and watch. I mean, you don't get to tackle anybody. There's contact, but it's not quite the same. So like my next question I was going to lead to is going to be defense again, but the more I keep thinking about it, I mean, like DJ Williams, is he fit? Is he look as athletic as he looks on Sundays and so far in camp? I mean, because if he can just cover tight ends better than Urlacher did, this defense will still be okay. It won't be shell-shocked from Urlacher not being there, besides maybe the handful of calls that he's going to see that Briggs still might not see the first year back of making all the calls on the field.
Well, let's be clear and say that the DJ Williams that some fans may be accustomed to have seen when he was 25, 26, 27 years old out in Denver.
That's the last time I really watched him play, to be completely honest. So
that's not the player that you're going to get. He's not that explosive of an athlete to where he was 3 or 4 years down the road. But this is still a really good linebacker who plays with instincts and he plays mean. I think when you get a linebacker like this who has some of the off the field history that you have with DJ Williams, obviously you don't want at that to the point where it's going to affect football. You don't want him having to serve suspensions like he has had to in the past. You don't want him having to just miss any time or do anything that kind of takes the focus away from football. But at the same time, when you see linebackers who have some of these off-the-field type issues, you get the impression that they're just a meaner, nastier version of linebacker, and that's something that you kind of want at middle linebacker. It's sad to say because I don't want any of my football players on my favorite football team to be bad people per se, but I want my linebackers to have a nasty streak, and DJ Williams is still a guy who plays really instinctually. He reads and reacts very quickly and tries to make sure that he can get a hat on the ball as quickly as humanly possible. Yeah, he is a very good linebacker. He's a serviceable linebacker. He's not the freak show athlete that, like I said, that you guys will remember him from 3 or 4 years ago. But this is still a guy who is probably an upgrade athletically over Brian Urlacher. Obviously, the issues with him
he's still like
versus,
31, so it's not like he's young to begin with.
The issues with him versus Brian Urlacher obviously winds up coming to the leadership side, the calls, the adjustments, the stuff that Urlacher gave you in terms of being a leader and being a captain of that defense.
Which that's what you're going to miss.
Yeah, you're going to miss that. That's not what you're going to get out of DJ Williams. But I think in terms of just pure play at the linebacker position, DJ Williams is going to be an upgrade over Brian Urlacher, at least the Brian Urlacher that we had last year that was hampered by the knee injury. I think he'll give you enough to where you're comfortable with him at middle linebacker. You still got Lance Briggs, who is all-world at the weak side. I think they're pretty comfortable with what they have on the strong side. You got John Bostic, who gives you a little bit of depth there in the middle. So I think they're comfortable with what they have at linebacker in terms of that mixture of youth and experience that they've been able to build up through the draft and free agency.
And then with the 2 rookies they drafted, and everyone's excited about Bostic, so I mean, am I saying that name right? I feel like I never say Bostic. Okay, I feel like it should be. I feel like it's missing a letter somewhere, but it's not. But yeah, I mean, he's another. I mean, we talked a lot about linebackers too in our last episode of the draft edition. So has he gotten any reps with the first team at all, or has he pretty much been second team the whole camp so far?
No, they've repped him. They've repped him at first team because there's always a certain amount of uncertainty there at linebacker. And I think one of the things that we talked about is if Bostic can grow into that role a little bit quicker and they can become comfortable with him in the middle, that gives them the opportunity to move DJ Williams to the strong side, which is a position that he's probably more familiar and more comfortable with based off his time in Denver. Don't get me wrong, James Anderson is a solid linebacker, but I think they would feel athletically a little bit more comfortable with a lineup that looked like Briggs, Bostic, and Williams across from weak side to strong side as opposed to having Briggs, Williams, and Anderson there. They like what they have at linebacker. They're comfortable with Briggs, Williams, and Anderson there right now. I think they hope that Bostic can come along quickly enough to the point where they can be versatile and just kind of move DJ Williams around to the spots they need him, because he has, I think, double-digit starts at every linebacker position across the 4-3. So he's going to be comfortable in a lot of different looks and variables, and like I said, he's most comfortable on the strong side. So if they can get Bostic up to speed as quickly as humanly possible, that's going to put them in a position to be more versatile at linebacker. Then you look at Kasim Green, who he becomes bonus and just a gravy to all that. If you can get anything out of Kasim Green this year beyond special
there's a lot
teams,
of potential in that guy.
Yeah, and that's why I said they're really comfortable with what they have at linebacker in terms of the mixture
you might be
that they
set
have.
For the future.
youth and experience. It's a really good balance. They've got two rookie linebackers with a lot of talent that they look to for the future, and I think they're comfortable there. And then you've got an all-world linebacker and two really, really solid veteran guys, and I think that puts them in a position where they're definitely probably as comfortable with where they're at linebacker as they are at any position on this football team.
And with a guy like Lance Briggs, we like same thing I said in the last episode. I'll say it again. I mean, not that everyone's a grown adult here. It's not like you're gonna look up to the guy, a guy like Briggs. But it's good to follow his lead because he has been one of the best linebackers. He is one of the best 4-3 linebackers who's ever played. And in my opinion, he's in the best Bears linebacker tree that we have. So I mean, those two guys getting to watch Briggs, and now that Briggs is making the call and is essentially be taking the role that Urlacher had on the defense all these years, that's going to help these guys even more, especially if Bostic gets in, and if you can get, like you said, you can get anything out of Green. I mean,
yeah,
that's huge. That's just it's icing on the cake because that both these guys have a lot of talent, and the Bears might have at least one future linebacker out of these guys. I think you potentially have two if they get it all together. But I guess that's any player, so that's kind of a broad statement there. Way to go, Darren. But another thing that I'm all over the board here, but it's kind of weird to talk about a kicker. But is there a kicker competition going on right now? Because I keep hearing all these weird things about Robbie Gould and going into a contract year. Is there really a competition, or is this just a placebo thing that's going on?
Robbie Gould is one of the most accurate kickers in the history of the
Fourth
NFL.
most accurate.
That's obviously something that we all know and recognize, but I'm not sure where it is that he decided that he was in a position to kind of be fussy over a contract. He's still a kicker. Ladies and gentlemen, let this be a lesson to you.
You are replaceable.
You have a son who's 5-6 years old. Teach him to be a kicker. Have them spend all their time just working on kicking because it's a very simple thing to worry about where you don't necessarily have to worry about catastrophic injury. It's a way they can be a part of a team sport like football that everybody knows
or a long
and loves.
snapper.
And it's something that they can perfect and become good at, but also teach them to shut their mouths because as a kicker, they are never, ever going to have room to talk about anything ever. Go make kicks, and if you continue to make kicks, you will ultimately be rewarded for it at the end of the day. Don't sit there and try to get into any sort of stuff where you're talking about contract disputes, all this stuff. It's just nonsense. And
if you're going to talk, be like Chris Kluwe, the punter for the Vikings, or former punter for the Vikings, who just talks about World of Warcraft on Twitter.
Yeah, be funny and fun. Don't be a guy out there who takes himself so seriously that you think that you're in a position to go out or you have some sort of leverage to go out and argue about a contract, because you don't. There are other kickers out there who will gladly take your job for less money than you do. So you might as well just go out, shut your mouth, make your kicks, earn your money, and then eventually you'll be rewarded for that. If you wind up, if you're Robbie Gould and you've been as good as he's been for as long as he's been, if you just be quiet, you can be pretty comfortable and confident to know that the Bears are going to value that and understand that they have a kicker who is better than 95% of the kickers who are out there, and they're going to reward him for that. They're at a point right now where they don't have really any cap flexibility to talk about contract right now anyways, and that's why they're saying very clearly for the Jay Cutlers, the Robbie Goulds, and the 40-something other people who are in a contract year this year, we're not going to talk about this until after the season. They have $2 million of cap space. If they wind up cutting a few people and making some room, it'll be to go out and sign a new guy that can help them on the defensive line like we talked about earlier. It's not going to be so that they can re-sign and extend somebody. This is a moot issue. It's something that we are not going to have happen this year. So just stop talking about it, especially if you're a kicker.
And if you're in Robbie Gould's mind, I mean, even regardless of how great you think you are, let's say you have a great year and Jay has a great year, Jay's going to get re-signed before Robbie Gould gets re-signed 10 times out of 10 every single day of the week. So he should not say anything ever because he shouldn't even be allowed. The kicker shouldn't be allowed on the team flight. They should have to find their own way home. But I mean, come on, you are one of the best. You're clutch. He's a total package. He can kick far now. He's got a big leg too, which I never thought Robbie Gould would get. I mean, he's kicking bombs now for Robbie Gould at least. And I mean, what did he hit? A 63-yarder or not 63? That's the record. And he hit a 61-yarder in preseason or something crazy in camp last year. I mean, he's got a great leg now too. But yeah, still, don't say anything. Shut up. Kick the ball. Show up. Go back to the locker room and go golf with Patrick Manley.
Exactly. I mean, he was out on Sunday, and they didn't really do anything fairly in-depth in terms of special teams. But he was out there rocking some CrossFit shoes, just rocking like some orange tennis shoes running around out there. They actually had him at one point. They were doing a little bit of special teams work in terms of the coverage unit, which, first of all, Joe DeCamillis, the guy's different. I don't really know how to explain what it is that he does, but he does things just a different way. If you could have seen some of the drills that he was running out there, they were using volleyballs.
I saw the big ball.
They were using volleyballs at one point to simulate blocking kicks. I don't know why you can't use a football to do it, but for whatever reason, Joe DeCamillis decided that was the best way to go about that. They used exercise balls. They were using Robbie Gould as a prop. He would sit there and hold one of those big old exercise ball like you see the big ladies use at the gym when they're trying to do their plyometrics or their Pilates or whatever the hell it is that they do. And Robbie Gould was just rolling these exercise balls. The coverage team was coming down, the punt coverage team. And basically, I kind of understood the point of the exercise ball. He'd roll it out there, and everybody would come and like kind of break down to the big exercise ball and make it stop and get there to that point. So it was like, because of a football, the size of it, it's kind of hard to get 5, 6, 7 people crowded around it to where they can all actively pursue the ball. So they use the big exercise ball so that everyone can get their hands on it and everyone can break down around it and kind of form that little circle around it. I kind of understood that. The volleyball The volleyball stuff went over my head. I didn't understand why they couldn't just use a damn football. But that's what they used Robbie Gould for on Sunday. He was rolling exercise balls out to the punt return or the punt coverage team.
Wow. Yeah, but he needs a contract extension, man. He works hard in training camp. Man, he needs that extension, that raise to hold the volleyballs and exercise balls and oh god. I remember watching him last year at camp, and he just basically sat on the golf cart with a bottle of Gatorade or whatever, and that was pretty much the end of his day most days. Kick a couple balls, and that was pretty much good.
Yeah, I mean, you don't do much as a kicker. You're not asked of much as a kicker. Basically, they ask that you put enough time into your craft to be as close to perfect as humanly possible. And Robbie Gould is definitely right up there. But the other part of that equation is, as a kicker, as a person who's only asked to do one thing and given one very specific job, they ask you that when you're outside of that locker room, just shut your damn mouth, go out, kick the ball, be one of the best kickers in the league, get paid for it, make a couple $1 million a year, go home and feed your family. You can't see the air quotes that I'm doing right now, but that's a direct Robbie Gould quote. He wants to work on this contract situation because he's got a family to feed.
Yeah, because he's really hurting for money.
Exactly. I mean, you're a kicker. You're making a very healthy salary.
I don't want to sound like one of those guys either. Like, this guy makes all this money. He wants more. He's a bad.
He should want more.
I don't mean to sound like that guy. I'm not that guy. He can make as much money as he wants and complain all he wants. But you're a kicker. Just shut up. Go home. Kick the ball. Just think about the situation. That's the bottom line. Like, I don't even care that he says he wants an extension. Think about the situation. You know you're in cap hell. You have to re-sign the most important player on your team, Jay Cutler, if he has a good year. You've got a lot of other players that come, but Corey Wooten, sorry. Corey Wooten's a little more important than a kicker. Kickers, we picked Robbie Gould off a construction site. We can go to another construction site, find some other bum who's out of the NFL, and bring him in to kick. I mean, that's just the bottom line. As great as Robbie Gould is, you're replaceable. I mean, I guess everybody almost replaceable, unless you're the quarterback or something. But, I mean, come on. I don't get it. That frustrated me as soon as I heard it. And then the fact that he takes to Twitter to go about it too. That was the bottom line where I'm just like, all right, Robbie, just shut up.
The other thing to remember quickly about Robbie Gould is
We're did at 53 minutes, by the way, so Adam's gonna kill us.
Oh, that's all right. We can go to an hour for a camp preview like this. But the other thing to remember quickly about Robbie Gould, and this isn't something we have to go in depth on, he didn't finish the year healthy last year. You want to go out and earn a contract, stay healthy, make your kicks, earn your money. It's that simple.
And we didn't really, I don't want to say we didn't miss him, because obviously there was a missed kick or two. But he didn't think about it in the last week. Oh, man, we don't have Robbie Gould. It didn't really, that didn't put into my mind. I didn't go into games going, oh, gosh darn it, we don't have old Robbie Gould on our team. I mean, it was just kind of, okay, we got this other guy. Kick the ball.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean,
I don't know. It's just ridiculous.
The kicker issue is something that just quiet, just shh. But more importantly, I don't want to talk about kickers.
Yeah, I'm over talking about kickers. I don't want to talk about kickers ever
me.
again in my life.
The other thing that certainly people who are out there listening to this in podcast world, most of them have probably most likely already been on Chicago Bears Huddle, so they've seen my feature on Brandon Harden. It's the last thing we really have to talk about. We've gone pretty much in depth.
Yeah, that was the last thing on my notes right here. So
position by position. So looking at the defensive backfield, obviously at cornerback, you're really comfortable with what you have in Charles Tillman and Tim Jennings. Those are two guys who are really, really good. Kelvin Hayden gives you some flexibility there and being able to pop into one of those starting spots if someone gets injured.
Very good backup to have.
He can play the nickel. I think that's another spot where maybe they would look for help if they had the opportunity to go out and do something in free agency, maybe look to add another corner. At safety, that's probably after linebacker about as comfortable as they are at any position. They've got 6 veteran guys when you look at Chris Conte.
This is the best we've been at safety in a long time.
Absolutely. With the way Chris Conte and Major Wright played last year, they went a long way towards establishing themselves just as starting NFL caliber, potentially even at some point in their careers with as young as they are Pro Bowl caliber safeties.
For both of them.
And so if they stay healthy, you're very comfortable in saying these are our starters. These are the guys that we're looking to be the starters at this position for as long as we can afford to keep them. But then even going beyond that they have depth in terms of what they have in Craig Stelz, Anthony Walters. They went out and got Tom Zibikowski, and then even Tom Nelson, who is a guy who might not make this football team, but that's a 6th veteran safety who has had 3-4 years experience of playing in the National Football League, and he can give you some help on special teams and stuff. At this point, you look at Brandon Harden with all the physical talent and capabilities that he has in the world, the big imposing frame, the 4.5 40 speed, the all the things that he gives you athletically. If he can stay genuinely healthy and really kind of adjust to playing safety, because let's remember,
he hasn't played football since 2011.
He hasn't played football since 2010. He missed
2010.
He missed 2011 his senior year.
You're right. That's what I mean. 2010. I'm thinking I'm all screwed up with my years.
Yeah, he missed all of last year with injury, and to boot, he played cornerback at Oregon State.
He's never played safety.
He has not played safety. His safety experience really boils down to 2 preseason games last year, and that's just not a lot to go on. So he still has a lot to prove for a 3rd-round draft pick.
And his problem's always been staying healthy. Period.
Exactly.
So,
and
I mean, how much can you expect? I love him. I like what he brings to the table. I think he's got a lot of if he can keep it together and stay healthy, we might have a good player on our hands. But I mean, the if healthy is a bigger if than Corey Wooten coming into the league.
When I talked to him on Sunday, obviously he told me he was 100% healthy, and I mean that's something that he pretty much has to say at this point. But he looks the part of health wise. I mean, it was a neck injury that bugged him, and it was a shoulder injury before that at Oregon State, and I think he had some knee injuries at some point in his career too. To shake that label of injury prone, you got to put a healthy year together, and that's what it really is going to boil down to, Brandon Harden. And I think with what they invested in him in terms of a 3rd-round draft pick, he probably winds up making this roster because he is a guy who has in his collegiate career been comfortable contributing in all 4 phases of the special teams game. So he does give you something there on special teams, even if he doesn't break into the safety rotation. So I think with what they've invested in him there and what he can do on special teams, he still has enough to make this roster. But if he doesn't put a full healthy season together, you're looking at a guy who's probably on the outs of not having a job this time next year if he can't stay healthy. So this is a make or break year for Brandon Harden. I wish him the best. He's a really good guy. He's very, very, very gracious with his time. I interviewed him last year for a story before he got injured, and he spent 5-10 minutes sitting down and talking with me. Interviewed him on Sunday for a feature that we have up on Chicago Bears Huddle, and he spent 5-10 minutes sitting down talking with me. So he's a good guy. I wish him the best. I just don't know that he can ever put a healthy season together, and if he doesn't put one together this year, this might be the end of the line for him.
Yeah, you're right. He has to pull it together now. There's no tomorrow in his future. But going back to the Chris Conte, that's always one that's always interested me. Ever since he first came onto the scene in 2011. I mean, you're right. Him and Major Wright really put together seasons that said, okay, I'm comfortable with these guys going. And if they both stay healthy, which that's always the question at safety. It seems like it's a question at every position this year. even including quarterback as usual. But I mean, Conti. The main thing that's always bugged me about him is his pursuit angles. At times, he takes terrible angles and gets killed on some plays. He got better at it last year, and he showed improvement. So if he continues to show improvement, you're looking at a legit free safety on your roster finally for the first time since in years.
Yeah, they're comfortable with what they have at safety. That's pretty much the bottom line with that. Like you said, it'd be nice. These are two young guys, so it'd be nice to see them make leaps and strides and continue to make improvement. And I think you're going to see that. I think we saw some of that in camp on Sunday. The defense definitely won the day, and a big part of that was the way the safeties were able to just kind of shore up the back end. It gives everybody a lot more confidence defensively when you have two guys that you're just genuinely comfortable with back there. And as long as they stay healthy, which, knock on wood, that is still a bit of an issue with both of these guys. They did a much better job last year at staying on the football field, but throughout the course of their career, they have had issues. But if they stay healthy, you're comfortable with what you have back there, and that just makes the whole defense just much, much better.
Well, we're approaching an hour, so I don't know if we want to kill Adam too bad with the editing. So, do you have anything else you wanted to cover? My notes have actually pretty much been covered in a short amount of time compared to what I thought it was going to be.
We were able to hit position by position, which is pretty much all we can hope at this point. I wrote a column on Chicago Bears Huddle at this point where it's everything is so tentative, and you can't just really put, for me personally, having seen 3 hours of practice one day, I'm not able to put a lot of stock in what I saw because it was the first day of padded practice for a brand new administration. Everyone was getting used to not only just having the pads back on, but having the pads on and being in a new system, seeing how physical the practice was going to be particularly. And so everything was really kind of shiny and new. I was really just – it was an appetizer to football in the fall for me. It was something that got me excited, got me going, got me really looking forward to seeing
Plus
what this football team – to see what this football team looks like come September 8th when they kick off. I'm excited. I'm definitely looking forward to see what we got there. Most importantly to me, though, we're going to grow with this team over the course of camp. Camp is something that really kind of builds and brews over the course of the couple weeks that it takes place. Can't put a lot of stock into that one practice I saw, but as we build up and you get 7, 8, 9 practices under your belt, you start to see consistency and you start to see flashes of stuff from certain people. You start to build a bit of a perception of certain people, and you get a better idea of what this football team is going to look like. So I'll be looking forward to getting back out there on Thursday, getting a second look, and just kind of developing a better feel for what this football team truly is.
Actually, I had one more thing I wanted to mention. Not that it's anything that's in question by any means, because we know what this guy is. We know he's going to be a freak. Martellus Bennett, how does he look in a Bears uniform? I mean, is it this kind of like a Brandon Marshall effect like it was last year? Not quite. Obviously, he's not quite as good as Marshall. But going from what we came from, this has got to look like, Dicka came back down and played, my friend.
He's hulking, he's imposing, you stand next to him and it's like, whoa, this guy is absolutely enormous. And then you see the way he moves out there and you say, whoa, why is that enormous guy moving that well? He's got a goofy streak to him. And if you follow him on Twitter, that's something that's very evident. Sunday, I think his wife and then one of his wife's friends were in the crowd, and a lot of people didn't make the connection. In the middle of practice, he ran over to the sideline and kissed what a lot of people thought was just some random lady. I think it was actually his wife that he was doing the kissing with, but right in the middle of practice, just runs over there and gives her a big smooch. And a couple people snapped some pictures off of that, and everybody got a big kick out of that and thought that was a big roar. He's a fun dude. He's funny. I'm looking forward a lot more to seeing what he'll be able to do on the football field for us. And I think he's kind of really proven what he is in terms of the athlete he is, the receiving option at tight end. He's big enough to be an advocate to above-average blocker.
And you could throw him out at wide receiver if you have to.
Yeah, he's going to make a difference. He's going to make an impact, and certainly he is going to give the Bears that option at tight end that they have not had since they traded Greg Olsen away, and that's something that a lot of people should be excited for, and obviously they will be excited to see that.
I have a feeling that's going to turn into one of Jay's go-to targets in the heat of things. How it was always Marshall last year. I think regardless of who's on the field, especially if Marshall's not out there, I think Bennett's going to be constantly in his radar of people to throw to. Because look what he did with Olsen, and that was obviously he was the only guy to throw to at that point in time. Now, I'm excited about this season, but I'm significantly worried. But at this point in training camp, I mean, like you said, we can't really put too much stock into anything, and you don't want to overblow everything. Just like the people who were going up, Jay's accuracy, it's not that good. He looks like Jake Cutler and all these weapons still. Yeah, it's called new system and new timing, and everything is totally different. So the people who are doing that, chill out, please.
Yeah, it's going to take time. There's no doubt about that.
We're at like an hour and 5 minutes, so I think we're pretty much wrapped up. As long as you got anything else you want to say, I'm pretty much good.
Yeah, the last thing that I'll say, just in terms of what we're going to find out over the course of the next couple of weeks, certainly we're going to have to keep an eye on what this offense looks like. I think that's a big part of what you do every single year, especially when you have a new system in. The way the offensive, you add some new personnel in there, cohesiveness, all that stuff we're going to build over the course of the next couple of weeks. And like I said, I'm looking forward to getting out there next Thursday, getting a second look, and really kind of reaffirming what I saw the first time and getting a better idea of what this football team is going to look like going forward in 2013.
Maybe we'll try to get another shorter podcast in here, maybe Thursday or over the weekend to discuss, your Thursday
and that's
trip
one of
to camp.
that's one of the reasons why we're able to go this long, is because we haven't had a podcast in close to 3 months now. As we get back into the swing of the season, we'll do something after we go on Thursday, and we'll get into the point where hopefully we're able to do this at least weekly going into the season.
Oh, and
into the regular season.
We can do two a week almost. I would like to do 2 a week during the season. It'd be great.
Yeah. We'll
these will definitely pop up more regularly as soon as preseason hits.
So for those of you who've made it this far listening, I said, I know we're being a bit of a windbag. It's because we haven't talked to each other for 3 months
since the
now.
draft.
Exactly. It's been 3 months, so we get the opportunity to finally come in here and blow off some steam. We'll try to do these a little bit more regularly and get them down to the point where they're 35, 40 minutes for you, so they're a little bit more of an easy listen.
And it'll be less of Darren says a topic and Ryan rants about it. It'll be more contributed. It'll be even on both sides. Once I can actually visually see what I'm talking about. If I was at camp this year too, it'd be a different story. We'd both be rambling on. It'd be a 4-hour podcast. So maybe it's a good thing I wasn't there this year. But
exactly.
Once preseason hits, you're going to be like, all right, these guys have talked for 6.5 hours. Time to turn the podcast off. But we'll get these things in regularly. Two a week would be cool. But we'll get that all figured out. So, yeah, but those who have stuck with it and always ask us about it, I mean, I know you get a couple people ask me about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I really appreciate you guys listening. It's great. It means a lot. And stick with us because this will just keep getting better and better, I think.
Have a good one, y'all, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you guys some other time.